I'm Janara Nerenberg. I'm a journalist, and we're here at the Rework Deep Learning Summit, and we're talking with Deborah Harrison now. And Deborah, thank you so much for being with us.
It is my pleasure. I'm delighted.
We first just want to hear a little bit about your background and your current role now, and we'll go from there.
Sure. How far back should I go?
Well, how did you get into AI?
Yeah.
You are a writer. We were just talking earlier. How does a writer end up in AI? What does that space look like? How do other women get into it?
I'll touch them all. In my path, I'd been at Microsoft for about 10 years and had been working on a variety of different projects during my tenure there. Some that I was really passionate about, and some that were just a job to have. And then I found myself working on Windows Phone, which is a really remarkable job. We operated in some ways kind of like a startup, and we had a lot of operational freedom to figure out the best way to communicate tone and voice, because it was such a new product and it had such a new UX approach, and we had people who really supported the idea of looking at this from a different point of view, and it was very vibrant and exciting. And one of the features that I saw come along was Cortana, and I'd been working on a series of features that were much more sort of typical to a UX design and UX authoring sort of slate that we would get assigned different features that we'd work on, and I saw that one coming, and I really want to work on that one. And at the time, it wasn't even particularly clear how expansive it would be and what the parameters might be, but it seemed like a really exciting and really different thing that might yield a lot of interest. And so I asked to work on it, and soon it became clear that it was a really different kind of project than anything I'd ever worked on before, because this was something that needed to be able to communicate.
What year was this?
This was, I'm so lousy at dates, I want to say 2013, okay. Around there, something like that. Right at the very beginning. Mm-hmm. And so I was the only writer assigned on it at the time, and we started getting dialogues where we needed to think through how is Cortana going to walk you through setting up a reminder or creating an alarm or adding something to your calendar. The concepts were reasonably well defined, and we had somebody I was working with named Lisa Stifelman, who's an amazing dialogue designer, and so she was thinking about the mechanism of it, but how would she talk? I'm going to say she because of the pronoun thing, but Cortana's not a girl. Cortana's not a woman. We're just going to pick a pronoun.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying.
So how does Cortana speak? And would it follow MSTP rules, or did it need to have a different paradigm? And I started asking around for who would be in charge of defining that, and it turned out there wasn't anybody in charge of defining that. And so I volunteered to look into it and make some notes and see if that might help me move the dial. And I crafted a set of principles that were designed to help people understand how Cortana needed to communicate. And those principles proved to be really resilient, and we use those as foundational, and they evolved over time, but they're still, the same basic principles are in play now. So over time, we started needing to add more writers because the volume became unsustainable for a single person. Right. And lo and behold, now we have a team. There's a team now that is, there are in 13 markets all around the world, and there's a writer in every single market handling each, the manifestation of those same core principles in each market that's relevant, but those principles are the same. So I did that for years and eventually came to manage the editorial team, and our job was, among other things, to shepherd all of the chit-chat conversations that would come out of Cortana, and making sure that everything that Cortana said really felt positive and transparent and offered the best of what Cortana could be.
So I'm getting this image that you're like right at the precipice of something. There's no precedent for it. It starts with you.
That's right.
It grows to be this global initiative.
Yeah.
Now there's a place for more writers at the table and people who don't have a tech background.
That's exactly right. Yes, because my background, I had been at Microsoft, as I said, for quite a while, and I'd been working as a technical writer before that. But before I wandered into technical writing, my background was I worked as a bookseller, and I ran a writing workshop. So I'd been a writer for quite a while in a sort of generalized sense, but I didn't come steeped in the knowledge of CS or
Right.
even code. I had taken a few code classes so that I wouldn't be totally befuddled by the concept, and found that I liked it. It had a relationship to language, actually, but I didn't have a passion for pursuing that as its own medium. So so I kind of wandered in, so to speak, off the street into tech, and found that there was this vast area of expertise that was needed.
So what was that like, that pathway? I mean, I'm just like wondering if people looked at you as this like curious creature from like another world. But were people very responsive to you at first, or did it take time?
No, it was. I think a lot of the people who wander into technical writing have a path that's not dissimilar from mine. And the challenge that I faced early in my career was more related to the perception of the value of writing as a discipline, rather than with my personal value as a writer, if that makes sense. So as soon as I found my way into some jobs that had stability to them, I was able to demonstrate value pretty quickly, and the people that I worked with were able to recognize the value I might offer. But the role itself was fairly compartmentalized a lot of the time from the rest of the engineering work that felt more substantial, or felt that it had more center of gravity to whatever the company was trying to achieve. This isn't just at Microsoft. This was I worked at a variety of places around the Puget Sound area for a little while, and some startups and some big places, and it tended to have kind of a similar. People weren't condescending, but it just felt like, well, you're doing whatever you're doing with the writing, and I'm sure it's great, you know. And then when I started at Microsoft, my first full-time position there, I got lucky enough to land on a team that seemed to really recognize the value of having collaboration that was very, very tightly wedded to design and user research, and we formed kind of a coalition, and we made a kind of a pact that if one or two of us were in the room in terms of representation, then we would make sure that the other disciplines would also come to the room.
And fantastic.
It was fantastic. It was awesome, and I didn't know at the time that was an incredibly rare opportunity. And I spent the next decade chasing it after it went away.
Wow.
I was just trying to find another role that felt like it had that same level of value and accrued collaboration, and that was one of the things that I really responded to on the Windows Phone team, because it started to have that feeling. I think partly because we were a little bit removed from some of the other development cycles.
Right.
It started to have a little bit more of a collaborative feel that made a chance. When I began working on Cortana, we had to work with design. There was the differentiation between what constituted Cortana's expression couldn't easily be divided by discipline. Because it was a new
that
thing.
interdisciplinary, like collaborative energy is so important when it comes to digital assistance, conversation design, sort of like the broader field of AI in general. So what does the space look like now in terms of writers in the field? Is it now widely understood and established that there's a place at the table, or? I
think that I wouldn't say that it's widely understood, at least from my anecdotal position here, and that's certainly one of the things that I'm trying to figure out how to articulate so that people feel. My experience is that when it clicks for people, it becomes a no-brainer. It's like when you see two women and all of a sudden it's a vase, you know, and you go, oh, I can't believe I didn't see that vase before. It's not that people are hostile to the concept; it's that they haven't really conceptualized the value associated with it. Exactly. So earlier last year, I made the decision to leave the Cortana team and start a new team that was dedicated to doing the same kinds of things we'd been doing on Cortana, but to try and bring that out to the rest of Microsoft. And the Cortana team is in excellent hands with its management and leadership at this point. And the market is, all the in-market writers, that whole ecosystem there is wonderful, and I salute all of them. But it was very hard to stop working with them because they're all marvelous. But I wanted to bring what we had learned and try and offer that a little bit more broadly into the rest of the Microsoft ecosystem and beyond. This is one of the things that I like to come to these kinds of things. So there's some secret sauce to some of the actual technical stuff that we do, but a lot of the work that my team is about, so my team is the conversational UI team at Microsoft, and I lead a team of several folks whose job it is to write for bots and other conversational agents and conversational UI, and there's a discipline associated with it, but a lot of the a lot of the things we've learned in crafting this discipline turn out to be incredibly extensible to the other areas of authorship across UX and across AI and deep learning development elsewhere. So that's something I'm trying to.
Can you say more about that actually? Like, what kind of outreach are you doing, or how can people learn about the field? I mean, what do people even study now? If, let's say, they want your job.
I love that question.
What do they major in?
I get that question, and I love this question.
Yeah.
And I love it, and I worry about my ability to answer it in a way that feels satisfying to the person who's asking it, because I know that sometimes
predict the path.
You can't.
Yeah.
And sometimes people come hoping that I'm going to be able to sort of put the breadcrumbs out that are just going to lead directly to it. But what I say, and I believe this deep in my heart, is that the thing that is remarkable about the discipline as it's emerging at the moment is that there's so much room for passion. There's so much room for talent. There's so much room for expertise. That is all true. And so if we run up, we meet somebody who comes ready-made with a set of expertise that is useful to whatever project we're pursuing, then of course that's really valuable to us. But I just hired a few people when I got to build this team who have no background in tech. And the things that they brought to the table were an intellectual and heart-driven curiosity about how to create conversations or create communication between people and people via devices or between people and devices that have an authenticity to them and that have an emotional reality, that are grounded in an emotional reality. And in order to do that, it helps so much to have some background that has brought you into contact with artistic and creative approaches, because those are things that give you a nice channel into thinking about how people operate and what it is that drives them and what they're looking for. And it also, we recognize that we have a lot of limitation in terms of our ability to be inclusive based on the fact that we don't have an infinite headcount, right? So we can only have 4 to 7 people involved in a project at a time. So you're not going to get to touch every single possible nuance of humanity with that. So we need to bring a lot of humility to those conversations, right? If we're trying to create language that's accessible and valuable to anybody, if not necessarily everybody, then we need to be humble enough to know that we aren't in a position to speak for anybody and everybody, but we are in a position to ask a lot of questions and to hopefully to put ourselves in a position of sort of having a constant question mark over our heads, where we're thinking this thing through and bringing and opening the door to other voices, even if they aren't part of our team explicitly. We'll go out and do outreach and understand and have sometimes difficult conversations about the limitations that we face based on our relative homogeneity in terms of we all live in the Pacific Northwest, and we've all made the choice to move there. So what does that bring to our set of biases that may not be fully examined? So it doesn't mean by asking these questions we automatically overcome these biases, but it's a mindset that you need to bring into the room. So you can get that mindset with a computer science degree. It's completely possible. You can also get that mindset by being a songwriter. And so one of the nice things about my discipline is that we tend to be in a position to teach you the technical knowledge that you need to have if you can come in with an open enough mind to learning that, and if you have at least some what's the word? I was going to say acuity, that kind of works. Anyway, some ability to pick up the things that we're putting down. Yeah. But
I mean, what you're saying reminds me a little bit about what people say about going to law school.
Yeah.
They're like, you can be a psych major, you can be an English major, but it's kind of true, right? And it seems like as the field expands and people will look at this as a viable career opportunity, which means that we will have more diversity and a greater pool of applicants and a greater pool of minds contributing to how these digital assistants operate and interact with human beings.
Exactly.
And I mean, I think that's the goal, right?
That's the goal. It's the goal for its own sake, and it's the goal for the just crass commercial point of view that how can you create something that is viable for people if you're not taking into account who it needs to be viable for.
Exactly.
Right? And so I'm all in just for the good of the world.
Yes.
But it turns out to have this wonderful side effect of making better products as well. So So
any closing advice for people who are listening or watching who want to get into your specific space?
I would say that a thing that we really respond to is the ability to have a discourse, and that people who come into a conversation with us ready to have not just a series of questions that they want answered, but a series of questions that they themselves want to have a debate about, that can be really valuable in seeing what it feels like to think through some of these difficult problems and help generate the kind of energy associated with finding successful paths to making this stuff realized.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure. Anytime.